Hello guys. So today we are going to learn about JavaScript events. So event means when something happens. For example, we can click a mouse or we can press some keyboard key or do something else. That is called an event. Now, events can broadly be classified into 4 categories. First is mouse events. Now, what are the examples of mouse event? One of the simplest is when we click a mouse. That is one event. Another can be when we do a mouse over, that means move our mouse over something, that is an event. So these are two of the events in mouse events category. Next, we have keyboard events, and keyboard events happen. Let us say when we press some key pressed event, right? Now key release event, when we release the key, then also we can have an event. So these are our events related to the keyboard. Next, we can also have form events, and the simplest example of a form event is when we submit a form. That is one of the events that happens. And then we also have window events, and the example is, let us say, load event, which happens when the window is loaded, or resize, when we resize our browser window. So these are the events categories, and each category can have different events. Now, one important thing is that whenever there is an event that happens, we as programmers can respond to that. So for every event, we can respond to an event. We can respond to an event. So simplest example is whenever we click on a button, then we can respond to it. But how do you respond to an event? For most of the cases, to respond to an event, we call a function. So for most of the cases, to respond to an event, what do? We call a function. Like in this case, there is a button, and we are seeing when you click on the button, you call a function, and that function is this function, which is greet. So the idea is there is an event, and we as programmers can respond to that event with the help of a function. So in short, whenever an event happens, we can call a function and run the function. Which means, for example, if a form submit happens, we can call a function. Let us see this with a simple example. Look at this code here, which is a very simple code. There is a button, and whenever you click on a button, we write here on click. The event is click, and in order to respond to the event, we can give a property on event name click equal to greet. And then whenever we click on this button, the click event is fired, which calls the function greet and executes the code. Simple. So once we click on the button, this particular code is executed, which corresponds to this function. So let us see this particular piece of code. I'll do a small modification. The name should be function. So let us try to see this code now. Let me just run it. So let's now try to run this piece of code. Here is it. Now I'll just try to click the button, and on clicking the button, the function greet is called, and an alert will display the message. And you can see this is working fine. So that is how we can handle an event. So the idea is that on the particular DOM element, which means on the tag on which we want to handle the event, we can just write on and the event name. Now this is a click. We can also write double click, which is on DBL click. And now you will see that if I click, it will not run. But if I double click, then the event is fired. I can try to change this to console.log because I'm going to show you another event that is called on mouse over, which means when the mouse is over, that time the event that is fired. Let's now try to just write mouse over me here and see our code. Now you see the moment I am going over it, okay, there is some error. Let's quickly look at what is the error. I believe there is small, okay, yes, equal to the function name, which is greet, reload, and you see the moment my mouse goes over the button, it displays a message, comes out, again goes over, displays a message. So that is the way we can handle events using on and the event name and greet, which is the function that is fired. Let us formally understand the ways in which we can add events. So the first way is event handler attributes, which means what we have done here, that means adding events on the tag itself, like on mouse over, on click, which we can see here. This is a basic approach and should not be used because adding events on the HTML itself basically makes the code less clean. Next approach is we can add an event on the DOM object itself. How do we do that? Well, let me just quickly show you with a small piece of code. I can just give this button, let us say, an ID equal to button, and then I can just write document dot get element by ID button, which is my button object, and then I can just add the event on this button object itself. So I'm saying that on click, fire the function greet. So let me just try to show you running this piece of code. I will just remove this particular event here, save it, and let me just run this piece of code now. Let me change the text also to click me again. And if I click on it, okay, so the small modification, it should be dot click. And let me see what is the error. Okay. So there is a small issue, but not a problem. Let's just see here. Function is also fine. ID equal to button. Okay, this is working fine. So I believe the previous one was fine. So let me again summarize. What we can do, we can get the DOM object, which is a button itself. And on that button, we can add the property on click and then point it to the function, which is greet. So that is also the way in which we can add event on a DOM object. I can just make it a little more cleaner code. So these two things I will move to the top here and define the function in the top. Yes, so that way I can do it. Okay, so the next one, this is also a good method because now you can see that I do not need to add any JavaScript code onto my HTML element, and my HTML is cleaner. All the event adding operation is done on the button object. But there is a better way, that is using add event listener, and this is the preferred way. So guys, as we have discussed that these two methods, which is the using event handler attributes and adding event on the DOM object, these two are not the preferred ways in which we handle events. The preferred way to handle the event is using add event listener. So now let us focus on the add event listener method and how we can add events using this method. So again, we will have the same example. I have the button. I will get the button. Yeah, I will get the button object. This is my function. So now, how do I add event listener? Very simple. Instead of what we did before, we will use button object dot add event listener, and the first value is the event that we want to add, which is the click. Note, we don't need to write on like we did previously, just the name of the event. And second, we need to provide the function that will run when this event is fired, which is greet. Now, let us save it and see if it works. And you can see when I click on it, the console is fired. That you can see from here, coming from this line. So this is how we will add events. Now, similar to that, we can also add an event called mouse over. How do we do that? Let's again get back. So now, instead of click, I can write mouse over, save it, reload, and now you can see the moment I hover over it, the event is fired. All right. So the interesting thing, in fact, about add event listener is that you can add multiple listeners to the same event. For example, let us say when I do mouse over, instead of one, I want to fire two events. First is greet. Second is, let us say, maybe just print message console. And here I'm just printing a message in the console, event fired. So now, and let me have the event as click again, which is quite often used. So on click, now I am only firing one function, which is greet. Well, I can fire one more. Now, instead of the greet, I can add print message console. That's it. Now let us try to run this piece of code again. And this particular greet, instead of console, I will make it to alert. So greeting is alert, and then it also fires another event handler on the same event click, which is printing the message in the console that the event is fired. Let's try to reload. And you can see when I click on it, good morning, what a lovely day is printed. And you have also another event fired, which is print message to console function, and it shows the console message also. So the good thing about add event listener is that you can add multiple listeners to the same event. You cannot do this with onClick or the other method in which we add event to the DOM object. Now, once you have added an event, can you remove an event? Yes. Button object dot remove event listener, and this is used to remove the event. Now, in this remove event listener, we can write the event and which function we need to remove, which is, let us say, print message to the console. So if I remove this event handler function for click, it will only remove print message console, but still it will fire the greet function because we have not removed it. We have only removed the print message console. Let us try to run this piece of code again and click on the click me. Message is displayed, but you can see there is no console message because we have removed the click event handler function, which is print message to console. If you want to remove greet, we can do that also. Remove event listener, on click, remove the handler function. Yeah, remove the handler function, which is greet. Now, if I try to click on it, you will see nothing happens. So this is the way, guys, in which we can handle events using add event listener, and to remove, we use remove event listener.